Oh boy. So here we are. I don't know, about 9 months since things turned especially shitty for me. And I want to distinguish, between the two types of pain that I've been suffering. One, and maybe I've spoken the more about it all throughout, because it is the one that really, that I'm used to speaking of, that's always been with me, right? Which is this inability to do the things, not just things that need to get done, because there's that, but also just things that maybe I should want to do, that should make me happy or whatever. But right now I'm particularly under pressure with things that need to get done. Now, those are always the ones that kind of rise to the top, right? In terms of getting, something fixed, or it's often been the case. But this year the burden, my taxes every year. But this year, the level of those burdens increased quite a bit, just in terms of so much happened with my wife's death that I've had to do things with, and then with my mother's death that I failed to do things with. And so many things I failed to do in both cases, honestly, but I got a few of them done in my wife's case. And have moved forward on some of them, but there are others. I've got a pile of money sitting in Europe that I just can't face, trying to figure out what to do to get it out of the bank's hands. I don't even know how much I care about it. It's not. It's a significant amount, but it's like, I don't know that it'll make a difference in my life, especially when I'm considering, gee, should I go shopping, because I'm hoping to be dead by the end of the week, But that particular type of anxieties, pains, laziness, if you want, I've had that thrown back at me again. That's what I always used to see it as. I'm so fucking lazy, I don't do this. And in some cases, I'm pretty sure that is the case. I think it's more that I'm just avoidant, though, in general. But in some cases, like, I had the choice of either making this video or going out for not too much of a walk today, because it's still kind of pretty, and it's cloudy. It was pretty. I'm always working when it's pretty, or, waking up, whatever. It's the same schedule, and then it turns to rain or whatever at the end of the day, every day here. Plus, with, the days getting shorter, it's much, much harder. It takes me so much time of seeing good daylight to motivate myself into pushing myself out into it. And this was the case in Phoenix as well. Although I think the days lasted longer there for maybe multiple reasons, one being closer to the equator perhaps, but another being in this kind of weird place in the time zone. I'm not talking about the lack of daylight savings time, which is sort of a point in it, but just it was at one end of the time zone, whereas I guess I'm kind of not that far into this time zone, because the coast even cuts it off before you get there. Which just means, for me it doesn't fucking matter, and this is one reason, now that we moved out of daylight savings time, I just don't respect standard time. I don't play by it. I refuse it, because I don't care how fucking dark it is when I get up and I start my work. In fact, I kind of like being able to see the dawn. after I've been up for 15 minutes, whatever, especially when I had coffee, it would be kind of nice to just walk outside when the weather's not too cold and stand on the porch for a minute or two and watch the dawn happening. Not as nice as sunsets ever, but mainly because who the hell's up at that hour unless they have something they have to be doing? And if they do, they probably can't spend much time just sitting there watching the sun. Yeah, so anyhow, these are all sort of familiar effects on me in creating misery. But beyond that, there is this very definite hurt, this sadness associated with my wife just not being here, I mean, almost anything I do, inside, outside, anywhere I go, new things, old things, I either have memories of times with her or, gee, I would have liked to have showed this to her. And simple tasks that, things like doing the dishes or cleaning my counter or sweeping or doing laundry or stuff like that. Things that, she used to do rather than me. Not a whole hell of a lot, but there were things that kind of were just, I don't know, it was easier to let her do them, in a lot of cases, somebody had to do them eventually, and I tend to put those things off, right, because I'm lazy or avoidant or whatever. But stuff like laundry, it made sense for us to lump our laundry together, and it wasn't like it just didn't make a lot of sense for each of us to do our own laundry. I didn't have any real special requirements anymore. The things that I do have special requirements for, I always would do by hand anyway, so that's not an issue. But yeah, I mean, every time I go outside, I think about, where I spread her, and I see that, and it's just an immediate moment of pain. Every time I see something that we sort of shared, like our friends sitting on my window ledge, it's a painful thought. Every time I have to do something that reminds me of her, it's a painful thought. And, it almost brings this wailing of suffering. And that surfaces every so often, maybe a few times a day, where there's just nothing else to do about it. And luckily for me, my built-in patterns for avoidance of other things allow me to avoid this pain just so easily. The choice of existence. So most years throughout my life, I would have, oh my God, I got to take care of this problem. And that problem might be my taxes. That would eat up at first. When I was young, it wasn't a problem, but more recently, it would eat up a quarter of my year or whatever, where I can't do a damn thing on anything because the taxes are hanging over my head and I have to deal with them, but I don't want to, so I keep putting them off. This is just how everything is. And maybe I can convince myself to do something, like some yard work or something like that. to avoid it. But to a large extent, so much of my effort goes into trying to avoid thinking about the thing that I'm suffering about, right? And the same thing happened with classwork always. I don't know why it doesn't with real work. It just doesn't, you know. I've got sort of this fixed schedule. I'm supposed to be there certain times. I'm supposed to be working during those times. And my work has a certain mechanical aspect to it where even though it's all, you know, brain work and whatever, it feels almost like a game, you know? But then, you know, I have these, lots of you knows here, I have these things that I have to deal with. So one very, beyond the stuff with my wife, with my mom, you know, there we go again. The complexity of figuring out how to get to that side of the continent and how to get to the house and how to deal with these things. It just became easier to avoid the problem. And the ways that I avoid things, I can come up here and I can play my board game. It's complex enough and mechanical enough that, like work, it eats everything up. To some extent, I can do some of the physical work in the yard without it hurting too much at the time. I can play video games. I can spam online. I can bury myself in a book. I can sleep. You know, that was a little different. It felt less of the same cloth. But when I cook, and I did most of the cooking of this nature anyhow, that's hurt. There's hurt there. When I sit out on the porch and have a cigar or whatever, unless I get myself fucking drunk, and I can be on music instead of on alcohol, I feel the hurt. Whenever I go down and get the mail, whatever I do, almost everything just touches that pain and brings it to the forefront. Earlier on, I was living in sort of that pain in a more constant sort of fashion. It's receded a little bit, not terribly much. I expect it'll take me several years, if I last that long, from prior circumstances that were at all similar. I've gotten worse and worse, and this is not just this year. Over the past few years, since I moved here or whatever, about sort of all of the things I must do. It was almost as if buying this place and the first few steps towards settling into it, getting the stuff from Phoenix, was the last gasp of effort that I had left in me. Now, I've kind of been there before. You get comfortable, and it's easier to just let everything fall apart around you than to make any effort, ever, to change things. Yeah, and work doesn't really help with that because work's all going to hell. Not like, it's not like I'm fucking up or anything, but the whole organization is moving in a way that, like, if I was a reasonable person, I'd be hunting other jobs and trying to figure out what I'd be doing. But instead, I think about it, I'm like, you know, with just me, I can probably make it to 90 with what I've got. And that's not even counting on Social Security or anything like that. So I probably, to some extent, I do work because it isn't bad. And that's sort of my worry. If I change jobs, there's that uncertainty. First of all, there's the big expense on trying to do it. And then there's, yeah, but this is the best job that I ever had. And even though all the signs are that the company is just going to shit in terms of caring about their employees or anything like that, any kind of loyalty, it's become a more modern company, something that like it hadn't been for quite some time actually. It probably never had really been a modern company in the same way, and now they're basically trading away the strengths, and not just in terms of treating employees well, but in terms of what we were actually doing. Trading away those strengths in a race towards the bottom with them, but pulling ourselves up in some other areas where we weren't meeting industry standards or whatever. But basically the idea is to just make it exactly like every other institution of its type. But again, I can't face things that I need to do a whole lot more than trying to switch jobs. And the very last thing I need to do is to add more chaos into there. Someone actually sent me a lead, as it were, and I talked to them, and it wasn't working out. Yeah, it just was not it wasn't an acceptable situation for what my needs are. And so I was able to take the easy route of not going that way. But I kind of just don't want to, I really just want to play this out and have it end as soon as possible, whatever it all is, because the idea of putting effort in for something that might not be worthwhile just doesn't seem worth it. But and that's actually where one of the problems is. Where did the pain end for me previously? The pain went away from my first marriage ending. I guess most of it was kind of gone by the time that my recently passed wife and I got together. Down to an acceptable level. And I don't know, I don't feel like being with her was the thing that ended it. That ended some of the loneliness. I think the loneliness was there after most of the pain had already left. It's hard to tell though, because I do remember periods, even while I was with her, where that pain was rather hefty. It has not been for a while. It's almost as though the only way to get rid of the pain was to achieve a deep enough and long enough lasting relationship that seemed permanent to replace the old one that failed to be. And it's funny because sort of the thing I promised myself to avoid that pain and disruption and fear and destruction ever from happening again was that, well, I have to be completely self-sufficient in the sense that, like, I have to be able to work, I have to be able to pay for my own way fully. I can't be in a position where I really need someone else just to kind of survive. And it turns out that wasn't, I mean, look, I'm not facing having to live at the river anymore, but it doesn't cure all the problems. And it's almost like I don't know if there is a solution to them. Because at the point that I'm at now, I honestly don't think that I'm at all likely, and I've explained this at other times, and it's in a way why my wife and I got together, was I don't think that I have more chances. It's a matter of age, a matter of tastes. As time passes on, what I would want doesn't exist anymore. And this was a hard situation to kind of fight into that comfort zone. Yet I feel that almost anyone going forward would be even harder to align properly and to get through those battles that have to be fought to sort of establish what a situation really is. Which means quite possibly the one pain will always be there for me. I don't think there's a way for me to get rid of that. The pain that comes from not being able to do the things that I need to do, that I know. The pain of them weighing on me and just piling up and constantly nagging me and making it so that I can't enjoy anything. But this other pain, the sharper one, I'm not really sure that's going to go away. I don't know that that can go away without me having something to replace what's lost. And more, it's just absolutely clear that there is no replacement, or that the likelihood of one is so very low. And I don't know. But there I've played out what little sun there was, so I don't have to go out. I can waste the rest of the day in my little hole. Cheers.